Thank you for joining us today for a conversation that is top of mind for so many of us in the business of making social and environmental change. It's hard to listen to or read the headlines without hearing the word unprecedented. And it's true, we are living in an unprecedented time. That's especially true when it comes to division. Some days, the unprecedented nature of our national dialogue feels, well, unprecedented. And today, I want to talk to you, our grantees and partners, about something that is not new. Our approach to tackling challenges is unwavering, no matter who is in office, in City Hall, in the State House, in Congress, or even the White House. And why is that? Because the problems we face are too big for any one foundation, one sector, or one point of view to solve alone. Simply put, they don't fit neatly into one partisan box. We believe when everyone is at the table, from all experiences and beliefs, our ideas are simply better. That doesn't mean that it's easy. In fact, it's very hard. But we know that listening to and understanding each other, even when we don't agree, leads to stronger, lasting solutions. Thank you to our many grantees and partners who share this commitment with us. And thank you to everyone who works for positive change every day.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for getting us started. We have a really insightful duo here with us. We have Kristen Soltis Anderson. Kristen is the founder of Echelon Insights. She's the author of The Selfie Vote, Where Millennials Are Leading America and How Republicans Can Keep Up. She's a political contributor for CNN, and she's a contributing opinion writer for the New York Times. With Kristen, we have Shannon Currie, and Shannon is vice president with the Benenson Strategy Group. She works with a number of clients that represent Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, institutions, and emerging leaders and businesses. And Shannon really specializes in research and messaging that reaches minority audiences. What's also really special about this duo is they're our cross-partisan opinion research team. So when they're working for political clients, Shannon will be working on the progressive side of the aisle and Kristen on the conservative side of the aisle. But we bring them together because we really feel like the work that we're doing and the issues that we're tackling, they don't fit in a partisan box. And so we really need to understand where the points of unity are and the opportunities for collaboration. And so we asked them to go out in the field, do some research, and help us to understand in these very divided times, where can we come together?
So we are in very divided times. And interestingly, the fact that we are divided is one of the things people are united about. And the fact that they don't like it, that they're looking for organizations, institutions of any kind that can try to bring us together and solve the big problems that we're all facing. The other thing that's really heartening, I think, in this data is that even though it feels like we're very divided, there's actually a lot of unity around the things people most want to see addressed. In our data, we asked, how important do you think it is to address a whole range of issues? And there were a lot of issues where you had 7 in 10, if not almost 8 in 10 Americans saying, yes, I think it's really important that we solve this problem. You don't get to 7 in 10 and 8 in 10 without people from both parties, from all walks of life saying, yes, I think this matters. And whether it's things like clean water, whether it's things like a K-12 education system that really works and prepares students for the future. These were the sorts of priorities that people from all walks of life, from different ideologies, all came together and said, this really, really matters.
And those are really important areas for those of us in the philanthropic sector and the nonprofit sector. Shannon, you dug into some of the demographics with these issue areas. What were some of the interesting things that you found?
I was really sort of taken aback almost about how important people found some of these environmental issues. I think it really speaks to people understanding that there are some big issues that we need to come together and solve. But I was also pleasantly surprised how 81% of Americans want nonprofits and philanthropists to come in because you guys are great at bringing people together to solve big problems. And I think that creates this great opportunity for nonprofits and philanthropists to be able to fill in those gaps because you guys are focused on the people in the community on the ground and you have better touch points with the people that know about the issues that are affecting their lives on a day-to-day basis.
Kristen, you saw some interesting insights also when it came to young Westerners on climate issues. Say more there.
I thought this was really interesting. So again, as you mentioned, when we work for political campaigns, I tend to work on the right side of the aisle. And so the conversation there around climate and the environment is fascinating because there's a recognition that among younger Americans in particular, this is a really, really, really critical priority for them. And that stretches across party lines. And you especially see that showing up when it comes to policymakers representing Western states, this real acknowledgement that, look, we have these incredible resources, we have these mountains, we have these rivers, and we have a lot of, especially young people, who care a lot about living an outdoorsy lifestyle. Hunting and fishing, yes, but hiking, being able to appreciate and enjoy the great abundance that we have in this country. And so we found in the data that if you were 18 to 34 and you lived in a Western state, you really over-indexed for concern about wanting to make sure that we were doing something about climate. We also found this when it came to young women. There's this really particular care about the environment when you look at women who are under the age of 35. And I thought that was a pretty striking finding.
As far as education, any particular insights there that stood out to you as well?
So on the education piece, I think what was more interesting to me was less, what are the divides underneath the surface, and more that the top line numbers really showed this interest in having an education system that can serve people who are on a lot of different paths, to make sure that you have a connection between the things that you are learning in the classroom and the real world experience that you need to thrive once you leave, whether that's getting into college or whether that's some other kind of path that awaits you, and making sure that it's not just a one-size-fits-all system. And that really shows up when we go deeper and we ask our respondents to tell us what the big priorities they have for our education system look like.
Yeah, asking a lot of, they want more critical thinking skills. They want real life internships and apprenticeships. I mean, I think we're starting to see that part of that education process is really just preparing our students for the workforce. I said it from the beginning when I first started looking at the data that I saw this growing trend of wanting more workforce development, more real practical, real time experience, because that is what is differentiating us. We can't always be stuck in the school books. You have to kind of see how the real world experience creates you for the job force of the future.
Who do Americans trust to drive some of this big change?
So there's a clear pattern when we ask people, who do you think should be involved in solving these problems? They are gravitating toward institutions that are sort of closer to the ground, so to speak. Anything that uses the word community or local is rating much higher than, say, the federal government. And that makes a lot of sense, right? If you are thinking about an entity that is big and further away, it's going to be perhaps a little bit less responsive, maybe a little less able to be nimble, where if you're talking about local business, community leaders, philanthropies and nonprofits wind up being in that category along with the more local institutions, because they are also viewed as being able to be responsive and nimble. And when it comes to the reasons why these organizations at that more local level are so important, it's because people are looking for organizations and institutions that listen. When we ask, what are all the different things that, say, a philanthropic organization or a nonprofit can do to really be successful and effective, what we're finding in our data is they want to see that any organization that's trying to solve a problem is really good at listening to the people who are affected by the problem, rather than trying to just jump in and think that they have all the answers themselves.
And I think the actual finding was 72% of the respondents felt that nonprofits could be strong and effective in making change.
Yeah, and to put that in context, only 53% said that they felt the federal government was effective. But certainly puts into context the very high numbers then that we're seeing for nonprofits and philanthropies.
I think everyone is just looking for solutions. And like Kristen said, it's about collaboration. It's really about listening to the people that are impacted about these issues on the ground, because they know the most.
One that we were talking about earlier is as far as, we need new approaches and new solutions. And there was an interesting breakdown by age.
Yes.
Can you say more about that?
I love studying generational politics.
We've heard.
And seeing how younger Americans think about things relative to older Americans. And my assumption going into this research was that when we asked people what type of change they preferred, do you want to see change that is bold change, that really kind of redoes things from the foundation up? Or Are you okay with something that's incremental, that really we should be focusing on building on the progress we've already had? I thought there would be a really big generational divide on this, with young people being much more likely to say, let's tear it all down to the studs and start over, and older people going, well, things are actually okay, but maybe we just need to tinker here and there. And actually, it was almost across the board. We had people saying bold change. 68% overall for kind of the baby boom generation, or really our respondents over the age of about 50. They were saying, yeah, bold change. And we found the same thing for respondents under the age of 35. The one group that was a little bit more open to incrementalism, although still 60% of them said we want bold change, was this kind of elder millennial or Gen X group, the sort of 35-year-old to 49. They were slightly more likely to say, whoa, let's pump the brakes. Let's build on the progress we've already got. But you saw it, both ends of the age spectrum was where you had the biggest appetite for really big, bold, transformational change.
Shannon, just, so many of those who are joining us today are nonprofits. What advice would we give to anyone working in the nonprofit space right now when it comes to, leaning into this opportunity to really lead on some of these issues?
I think relationship building is really important. Understanding the who and the how people are being impacted really does help drive strategic priorities. I also think it's really important too to acknowledge that you guys have the ability to shift, like I said, shift priorities when you need to and be very responsive. And I think that's what really builds trust at the end of the day, because you guys can create those relationships, bring in people. It's really about hearing those diverse voices. And that's really what kind of starts to create the policy lane that needs to answer the issues that people are looking to be solved.
I'm glad you mentioned building trust, because the backdrop to all of this, this survey is a really, really interesting snapshot in time. But it's coming in the context of all sorts of data points that we're seeing every day of declines in trust in all kinds of institutions, right? Whether it's the media, government, et cetera. People are saying, I don't know if I trust many of the authorities that maybe I would have trusted 10, 20, 30 years ago. And so along with that, anyone who wants to come in and say, I'm going to help solve a problem, doing so in a way that is really characterized by a willingness to listen and humility. I want to hear what the people on the ground who are really affected by this issue have to say. I want to hear from a wide range of people who have different thoughts about how to solve this problem, rather than just coming in and saying, nope, we have our approach and this is how it's going to be done. That's so important to rebuilding trust in an era when it is a scarce commodity.
One thing that also you probed on and really saw just high numbers across the board, regardless of generation, party affiliation, is just the sense of belonging and how important that is to well-being, both for individuals and communities. Can you guys dive into that a bit more for us?
Sure. So as I said at the very beginning, the one thing that unites us is that we feel divided and we feel disconnected, and we don't like that we think it's important to feel a sense of connection and understanding with others. And so in our survey, we asked, do you believe that community well-being kind of hinges on people feeling like they belong? And the answer is yes. And it's not just one group of people or the other who say that. We found that among Republicans, 84% agreed. Among independents, 83% agreed. Among Democrats, 86% agreed. You can't get 86 and 82% of Republicans to agree on a whole lot these days, but they agree that belonging really matters.
Belonging, having respectful conversations, and people want to have the opportunity to talk about their feelings and not be judged. And so a level of just respect, with the listener bringing some empathy to the conversation, helps create this safe environment where this is where communities are going to be able to start to thrive, when we're listening to each other, when we're respectful of each other, and when we're really just thinking about our collective well-being.
Well, thank you both for joining us. And, again, this is really informative to the work that we do. We believe, we need everyone at the table. The problems are just too big for one foundation, one point of view, one sector. And so understanding where these points of unity are is really helpful to our work. So thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you, Daphne.